In the beginning, Apos was whole, a land of chaotic denizens made equal by the virtue of leading short, reckless lives. The world was ripe with endless mystery, and death existed only to bring joy to the act of killing. Across the darkening sky of this infernal sphere, a sole virtue once flew, and thus dawned the era of change. This was the birth of Tanna. From the core of this godly ray he emerged, Tan, a being of sanctified justice. He set to scourging the lands of all its evils upon his arrival. The only god that this world would ever know had arrived, and with powers of magic, flight, and conjuration of living beings, it was all wiped clean, and Tan brought sense to what remained. As quickly as he'd arrived, Tan was gone. Mankind was left alone in his wake, a new creature of free will, having been made in Tan's image. Civilization began on Apos as a great collective. Every human believed that they trod a holy land, and they lived their lives according to Tan's parting words, and by this they were unified, equal. Technology thrived, but for all they did for themselves, none dared stray away from the tenets of Tanna. They denied themselves the study of magic, the pursuit of air travel, and the engineering of new life. Such rights always having been reserved for Tan and Tan alone. Tanna was set in stone for millennia. Human beings disagreed little in this time. Every horizon one could spy became the domain of the massive nation of Dreer. Every ruler had all they'd ever want, and society was fair to any privy to the word of their religion. This left them all with little to do but engineer greater and greater technologies. Those that refused eventually found an interest in the seas. One day, a sole adventurer, a man known only as the Master of Parody, left the coast. The Master of Parody found that the ocean held a vast archipelago in its center, a land inhabited by humans that called themselves the Zavalain. The Master lived among these people for months, doing all they could to learn their way of life and exploring the land. He was gone for nearly a year, and all had assumed he had perished in the empty waves. But then he returned, and he told them all of what he'd experienced. People heard the Master's description of wonder and excitement and awe. That is, until he began talking about the people he'd met among the Zavalain. The Zavalain led simple lives and built only small villages to meet their needs. But in order to reach this point and survive the dangers of their lifestyle, they became masters of magic. Dreer would hear nothing more of it. For condoning the use of magic and sympathizing with the sinful, the Master was put to death. His death was seen as a victory in the eyes of Dreer, but those among them that had for so long hoped to hear exactly what the Master had to say were radicalized by the event beyond repair. For the entirety of the following year, the vast technologies of Dreer became tools to turn the citizens on one another. The Master's grave quickly surrounded by a bloody, impassioned conflict, the first the land had truly known since Tan set it to rights. In the end, the Master's family came forward at last. Their elderly parents served as unstable diplomats for the Sultans of Parody. While Dreer was distracted by the Master's parents, the rest of the Sultans of Parody embarked on an exodus, and just like that, the debate was over. The Sultans of Parody joined the wonderful land that taught them how to dream, and together with the Zavalain, they brought Parody to life in the eye of Tanna. 7 years passed since Parody stepped away. Tannic vengeance carried the Empire through a rapid arms race, and in its midst, one individual had made a breakthrough. For decades of his long life, Pontifex invented in reclusion. Day in and day out, he'd wring mathematics and machining prowess out from his mind, and onto what had become thousands of pages of blueprints. Pontifex was visited in a dream by Tan himself. He learned that if there can be another side to Tanna, then the world would have time for his own as well. With that, he began prototyping and protecting a single project in secret. Like a second coming of Tan, Pontifex rocketed into the clouds above, spreading his beloved wings to bask in the gloriously close sunlight. All looked on in awe. He came to them as a prophet, flying from stronghold to stronghold, daring Tan to strike him down before them. Pontifex had made peace with his end that day, but was astonished to awaken a world where he lived on. When his location hit the airwaves, followers crowded to the zone, first swarming from the city of Reeve, Then many hailing from as far as the highlands of Bool joined the Prophet's side. The people led a mass protest, first intended to remain peaceful, only for it to turn bloody almost instantly, so many old hatreds having been raked up. Pontifex was escorted away from the front lines, and went from a beloved savior to an overworked war machine within the span of a few days. He set to producing as many new sets of wings as he could, while his followers bled and died to buy him the necessary time. This newly inspired sect of Tana claimed to have a new, rational spin on Tan's design, just as Parody had, so they took up a name to paint on their banners. Above the rapidly swelling mass grave that the city of Reeve was becoming, white tapestries flew with pride, spelling what Pontifex felt while basking in Tan's light. In every sense of the word, they saw themselves as purity. With the 8 sets of wings that Pontifex had gotten functioning without error, he and a handful of his closest followers put an end to the struggle. They set out across the battlefield at speeds unseen by humankind throughout history. Within a day, they swooped down on 5,000 followers, whisking them away to the lands beyond the uncrossable Tajra wildlands. Pontifex and his trusted aide landed on untapped soil. Purity named Pontifex as their king. When the people thrived to the point that they rivaled Dreer's number and tech, Pontifex ordered his strike. Dreer would forever know this war of the skies as a dark day in their history, as Pontifex's army claimed the lands that bore him so long ago within the same year. A member of Dreer's parliament declared a state of emergency to make his voice and his alone heard. Shahzavar, Regent Lord of Catamount City, spoke not on behalf of the nation, but himself. During a worldwide live broadcast, he delivered a cold, brutal speech regarding the state of the nation. He declared that Tana was a virtuous pursuit, but it had no place in the war against the sinful. He saw the miracle technology that they had at their disposal, and warned that Purity wouldn't be the first to find a way to turn it against them. He ended his musings with a statement that would live on in infamy from then on. As Sultans of Dreer, we're surrounded now by the same world Tan first visited us to correct, and all that he left us to combat them was his petty teachings. While those heathens still breathe, there is no future. We're walking only towards calamity. He turned to reveal a device at his side. For all to see, he siphoned his blood into the machine, and it produced a deformed, fire-breathing clone of the crazed lord. With this harrowing display, he turned to his audience, announced the secession of his new Sultans of Calamity, and the broadcast was cut to black. Many flocked to the city out of fear. They found what was once a bustling commercial hub had been replaced by a towering fortress, guarded by nightmarish genoblends of Apos's wild animals. Shahzavar had won the battle before Dreer even knew to wage it, and so Calamity was let go without a fight. Those that remained in Dreer were wrought with terror, but were content with their peril, knowing full well that Tan was on their side, and theirs alone. The Dreer media had warped to the point of being constantly dedicated to demonizing their enemies. Their culture romanticized the war effort beyond all else. And this is how we find Apos now. The battle lines have been permanently drawn, every side prepared to wage war beyond imagination on one another. Challenging glances are cast in every direction, as dozens of armies square off around the world every day. No banner likely to go unbloodied in the foreseeable future. Who will you fight for? Dreer, Parody, Purity, Calamity? You decide the outcome.